Hello. All right. All right, we're going to go ahead and get this going. I know there's a lot of anxious people in the audience. You want to hear what we have to say. But first of all, I want to welcome you to our first community forum as the school district is looking at redistricting. First of all, I'm Rob Chabot. I'm pleased to be the president of the Board of Education at this time. And now I'd like to introduce my fellow board members who are up here on the right. First will be Dr. Courtney Graves, and she'll be speaking in a few moments as well. I have our secretary, Dr. Donna Thurman, our assistant secretary, Connie Harge, Director Leslie Hogshead, Director Jessica Ponder, and unfortunately, Mr. Scott Ebert cannot be with us tonight. He had a prior family commitment. So again, welcome and thank you. It's great to see everybody here. Time and time again, we have asked you to step up and support the Ferguson-Florissant School District, and time again, you have done that for us. In the 7 years, or almost 7 years I've been on the board, we passed 2 bond and 2 non-taxable or bond issues, and then 1 tax levy in order to support the school district. So thank you very much. You know, Ferguson-Florissant has a very, very rich history, and it's something that every board member up here, every administrator, and everybody in our community understands and respects that history. We have buildings in our school district. Central Elementary is the oldest elementary school or school building. I understand, was it St. Louis County? Is that correct? Yes, people are nodding their head. Rich history. I understand that we even have a family member, and Dr. Davis was talking about that their grandfather, was it the grandfather that laid the bricks, the masonry bricks or something for Central Elementary? And then, of course, Vogt Elementary, and then all the other school buildings that we have. They're home. You know, our school buildings are family to us. They're just not brick and mortar. And it's something that we all recognize and we respect. So as we move through this redistricting plan, which right now it really isn't a plan, it's a conversation. And this is the first conversation tonight regarding where we're going to go. You are going to hear from Dr. Davis here very shortly. He's going to lay out the thinking, why we on the board have asked him to take a look at the school district as a whole. And personally for me, man, this is such a fantastic opportunity for us to really take a deep look at our school district, to look at the past, to look at where we're at today, and then where we can go in the future. And you know, I know when you start talking about closing schools, you know, the panic button gets hit, people get anxious, you know, am I going to have a job? Where are my kids going to go? And we understand that. But we also look at it, excuse me, that this is going to create an opportunity for us to create a school district like no other in the St. Louis County. I mean, we started off with developing our first STEAM Academy here in North County. This is something that is so proud of. That, and I told the story when we opened up the school about when I was on the campaign trail, and everybody talked about, you know, why can't we do this? Where are we going to go tomorrow? And it was such a gratifying feeling as we're opening up that school to say that why is now. And this is just going to be an extension of that. So I understand the emotional element of this. I understand that your people are very protective and emotionally attached to those buildings. I get it. We get it. It's still going to be there. But let's keep an open mind as we move forward to figure out where we are going to be tomorrow. And there's so many great things that we should be proud of at our school district. We're actually innovators in a lot of things. We are the founding area for parents as teachers. We were the first school yay! First school district in the county to provide free full-day kindergarten. Again, the STEAM Academy, first one here in North County to offer a STEAM Academy. So we are innovators in education. The reality, though, and I would say a sad reality, is that sometimes our test scores don't always necessarily reflect that. And I'll say it, you know, right now, based upon the APR, and this is where people cringe, we are the second worst school district in the metro area. Yeah, you know, that was a gut check. And Dr. Davis is equally upset as we are. It was unexpected. We are making gains, we are making gains academically. We slipped in some other areas that we're working on and are going to fix. But I truly believe that the future of our school district is quite bright. And I am so pleased to be on the board. I am pleased to have my children in this school district. They've been going since pre-K. My oldest is now a freshman in college. My daughter is still a sophomore. So I am truly committed, as well as the board here, committed to this school district and committed to you. Now, with you, you have the cards. So what's going to happen is that Dr. Graves is going to speak, then I'm going to turn the microphone over to Dr. Davis, and he will give a presentation. At that point, when his presentation is done, we're going to give you an opportunity to complete that card. We are hoping that during the presentation that your questions have been answered. If they have not been answered and you still wish to speak, you will be given that opportunity to do so. And we'll have the microphones. We only have one microphone? Okay, then we'll have two microphones down here on each side, all right? We are going to have a short 15-minute intermission between the presentations to give you guys a chance to fill out the cards and for us to be able to collect them and for us to be able to sort them, all right? So thank you again. In the future, you're going to hear from me a lot. You'll be hearing from the board a lot. We're going to have forums planned starting into next year. In addition to that, board members as well as cabinet will be available to sit down with you and have a conversation. We can meet at the coffee house. We can meet wherever you want. If you want to host us at your house, I'm fine with that. I love talking about this school district. If you want to meet me at Starbucks or the corner coffee house, I love mocha lattes. Just throwing that out there. So, okay, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Graves.
Good evening, everyone. As Board Vice President, I would like to personally thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight. I am confident that the path that Dr. Davis and his administration is leading us on is paved with a lot of thought, innovation, and is fiscally responsible for the best interests of our families, communities, and businesses. When I first started this journey as a school board member, I stated that the school is the glue that holds our communities together. It is important now more than ever that we continue to improve the quality of education for all students, no matter what end of the district they may lay. The decisions that are being made to redistrict our schools have to take into account how it affects our students, our families, our community, and businesses. This change is not something that can happen overnight, nor is it something that can happen with the school district by itself. It is going to take everyone in this room to move the needle. Change is hard at first, messy in the middle, but will be great when we succeed in making our district one of the top performing districts in the state of Missouri. It is important to me that all voices are heard. It will continue to take forums such as this to come to the best plan for our district. So if someone is not here tonight, make sure that you invite them to the next forum. Share it on Facebook, Snapchat, send an email, whatever you can to make sure that this room is not only filled, but the room next door is filled as well. Each board member is assigned a feeder school, so please also reach out to us. For McClure South Berkeley, we have Dr. Donna Paulette Thurman and Jessica Ponder. For McClure, it's myself and Leslie Hogshead. For McClure North, it's Connie Harge and Scott Ebert. And then our board president, he'll do home visits, school, work, job, wherever it is, as he says, Starbucks and coffee houses. So just to let you know, we are available as well. If you just have ideas, if you want to send us an email, bounce things off of us, ideas and stuff to share, we are all available. We all want our district to succeed because we are 9 communities, but 1 district united.
Thank you. You know, she hit on something that was very important, and that's the idea of ideas, all right? Because, you know, while we're willing to have conversations and listen to you, what we're looking for is ideas to move the district forward. And again, this is like a clean slate. This is a perfect opportunity for us to do that. So think about that either in your comment cards or as the months progress and you serve on a committee or you just want to meet me at the coffee house for that mocha latte. Think about ideas. What do you desire? What do you hope? We want to hear from you, all right? All right, at this time, I'm happy and proud to introduce our superintendent, Dr. Joe Davis.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All righty. Good evening, everybody. I hope that you had a great day. And before I get started, what I do want to do is to recognize our staff because they will be a part of the process where we have questions and making sure all the logistics are worked out. So if all of administration could stand at this time, principals and all the folks who work at the central administration, please stand. Awesome. You too, Haka. Awesome, awesome. Now, great. I'm glad to see school folks being here as well because they can help us with some of the questions likely. Teachers, where are teachers? All teachers that are in the house with us this evening. Let's give our teachers a round of applause. Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I always get in trouble because I start naming groups and I'll forget somebody. So I'm going to say all of those who support teachers, and that includes me, stand up. All folks who support teachers. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much. Also, I wanted to take this opportunity to recognize any of our elected officials. I know we have quite a few. With some elected officials I've seen since, staying at the door this evening. So all elected officials, please stand at this time. Yes. Awesome. Got our council people here. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your support. We also have Ms. Barb Frazier from Steve Stinger's office. I think she's here. She's here, so give her a round as well. Awesome. I did have an opportunity today to talk with Cora Faith Walker, and we're going to be having a community legislative breakfast on the 16th of December, and really encourage our elected officials to be a part of that, largely because we want to continue strengthening the relationships we have with our municipalities, in particular our mayors. I thought I saw Mayor Snyder earlier. Is he? There he is, Mayor Snyder. I'm wanting to meet with all mayors, council people, and really strengthening that relationship with our board so that we make sure we're all on the same page about where we are with Ferguson-Florissant. So I'm going to read a quick statement, and then I'll dive right into the presentation. I actually have a video that I will be showing, and it's about a 4-minute video. I think gives some context, and hopefully we'll begin answering some of the questions you have about why now. Let me say that I'm hired help. I work for the board. And the board has charged me in my evaluation process to look at our district and our resources, right? And to begin having this conversation about redistricting. I mean, they said that a long time ago. And so we're just at that place now where we're having this conversation in a very thoughtful way. And I will say that I think you will understand more as I go through the presentation this evening. So let me read this because I think it's important, and I didn't want to veer from it. But before I do, I like oatmeal raisin cookies, just saying, right? Like I like lattes too, but I love oatmeal raisin cookies. So good evening. Thank you for coming out, and it's great to see so many of you who are committed and concerned about the future of our community and the future of education for our children in our community. Tonight, we hope to lay rumors to rest and begin a dialogue for planning for the future of Ferguson-Florissant School District, especially in the areas of facilities and redistricting. First, there has been no decision to close any school. Administration and I serve the board, and in line with the board's goals, we are actively working to provide effective instructional programs as well as managing our resources efficiently. We are firmly committed to stakeholder involvement in this entire process, and I will talk about that some in just a bit. This process includes students, parents, community, staff, and many others who support Ferguson-Florissant School District. Prior to engaging our stakeholders, administration has begun examining our current state as well as our present and future needs. This process is important to learn as much as we can about our district, the facilities in our district, enrollment patterns, and trends as we make recommendations to the board. We have been and will be in schools to assess our current facility usage. Administration presented information on October 25th to the board in a study session. That information was presented with the disclaimer that no decision has been made, other options could be considered, or we could do absolutely nothing. Included were options for reorganization to a pre-K through second grade model, and I'll talk about these in a little bit, a third through fifth grade model, 6th through 8th grade middle schools, and 9th through 12th grade high school model. All of this was just one example, as one example of the many possible examples or possibilities rather that exist. Unfortunately, some took the example as a done deal, and it is not, and other rumors and words begin to spread. So I want to lay the groundwork tonight to give you the facts of where we are today, and I hope that you see this information, see where we are, and that we can work together in making our district the best district, not just in North County and this state, but in this country. We can educate all children well. It is absolutely doable. And I can tell you, veering from this a bit, being first-generation college, that we have some dynamite teachers, and we know what it takes to make this a great place. But it's going to take time and more work. So with that, I'll go to our presentation here and just talk a little bit about where we are with our strategic plan. So, I'll just let you read that real quickly. Take about 5 seconds to read that. I want to turn your attention to the E. As all of them are important, united. We always talk about one district united, and that is what united stands for. Certainly the understanding and everything that goes on in our district has to do with the classroom. But tonight, and as we move forward, we will be talking about all of those, infrastructure in particular, but especially economics, which is the fiscal responsibility that the board has to this community about how taxpayer dollars are being spent. Next slide. So here's our vision. I'll give you a chance to read that. We want every child, irrespective of race, creed, or color, zip code, to be educated well. That's the vision. Whatever society they decide to live in, we want them to have the skills they need to be successful. The mission. Awesome. Next. So here's just some values. And I put these up here, and I want to give you a chance just to digest them because it'll make sense as we move through the presentation why we're doing this work. So here are our values. I do want to say a couple things, two in particular, the One District United and the trust. I want to say to all of you, and this is personal, that I appreciate every one of you who reached out to me during the ordeal I went through in North Carolina and the support that you gave, the calls, the emails, and standing with me along the way. I just want to take this moment right now and say thank you for that. And I said then, and I'll say now, that trust is really important. And I know that some trust may have been lost during that time, and it is my aim. I fully take responsibility for where we are as a district. I take a personal responsibility. Not only does my child go to school here, we bought a house in Ferguson. We have lived since I've been here in Ferguson. We rented a house beforehand and decided, we wanted to live in our community. And so we bought a house in Ferguson. I'm absolutely committed to our community. So I have a vested interest in the direction of our district. I want us absolutely to be the best. And I know what it takes to educate. Now, I'm not a lawyer or a doctor. I am a teacher. And though I taught math, I could do some other teaching. I did a little bit of reading, but I know education. And that's because I had great teachers who educated me well. And I'm first generation. My grandma, she couldn't go out to the school. She had to work, right? But she made sure that I went to school ready to learn. and teachers taught me well, so I'm grateful for that, and all of you. That trust is really important. And so what we aim to do tonight is to not give you anything to make it sound good. We want to give you the raw data where we are. We haven't done a lot of work yet because we can't. We need your help in this process. But trust is important. And the board has given me direction, and we will be going back and forth, and I'll talk about that some, but that trust is critically important in this entire process. All right? So I want to show you a quick video. And as you think about this video, I really want you to think about your experience in high school, especially if you went to Central or Vote, or Robinwood, or McClure North, or even Berkeley High School before it was MSB. I just want you to particularly think about public schools as you look at this video. It's about 4 minutes long, and I think it will give you a little bit of context about why we are doing some of this work. So if you would go to the video for it.
Teenagers have the best BS detectors on the planet. So when we say we want them to love learning, to be curious and think critically, they don't quite buy it. We actually believe ourselves when we say it. Why wouldn't we want our young people to become innovative and ethical humans? But in our hearts, we know what they've been trying to tell us for a long time. American public high school has failed to keep up. But a long time ago, public high school was a place of radical innovation. Free and accessible schooling was seen as a vital part of democracy that would guarantee equal opportunity for all. Industrialization transformed high school into a place to prepare the future workforce for new jobs in factories and large-scale farms. To ensure that everyone received fair and uniform instruction, we adopted the Carnegie Unit, which quantified learning based on the amount of time a student spends sitting in a classroom. The curriculum shifted to focus on rules, repetition, and small contained problems rather than large ones. Subjects were broken into time-based chunks signaled by a shrill bell. To prepare the teenagers of the early 20th century for factory life, we put them in a pre-factory, and that's where we've kept our teenagers ever since. In the last 100 years, as careers have moved from the industrial to the idea-driven, as global economies have risen and fallen, as women have strengthened the workforce, as the U.S. has welcomed nearly 250 million new people, as we've gone from a Model T to a Tesla and a switchboard to a smartphone, high school has stayed frozen in time. We want our students to think critically, but we make them memorize. We want intellectual curiosity, but we pad the schedule with easy courses. We want innovation, but we teach to a packet. We want self-reliance, but we force them to sit prisoner in the name of learning. Our refusal to act is costing us. America is falling behind in the world, and every year we're losing more ground. But here's the thing. We can fix this. But we have to scrap the blueprint, revolutionize this dangerously broken system, and if we do, if we can completely transform the model for public high school, we think we can change a whole lot more. If we change high school, we can change the future workforce for a complex, competitive world. We can change the poverty rate and the inequity of incarceration. We can change the broken connection between schools and communities. We can change the very building blocks of American society. If we profoundly change high school, we can reach not just the 50 million kids enrolled in public school, but the hundreds of millions who will follow them and the billions of people worldwide that they will impact. It's time to step up. It's time to rethink the model itself and truly innovate. Let's challenge the idea of bodies and seats and 500-page textbooks. Let's teach to the subject, not to the bell. Let's inspire a new kind of knowledge that's agile, creative, and endlessly relevant. Let's apply our astounding ingenuity to one of the largest public systems in the world. Let's truly reimagine what a public high school should be, partnering with the brightest talent in the country. Let's make a renewable system that works for today and tomorrow. Let's honor the beautiful promise the founders of public school made. Let's make a brave leap forward. 50 million kids need us to try. Let's build a super school.
Yes. So, when you look at this video and look at some of the work going on around this country, we are still preparing children for an industrial age. And while an industry is a very important part of our society, continues to be that, agriculture as well, we are also in an information age, and a technology age, an idea age. And we have so much more work to do in order to get our students ready for that. And so many kids don't have the chance to go to a private school or a different kind of school where there is maybe more innovation going on. But we can do this in our public schools. So we take a look specifically at what do we do for all of our students. One of the things you'll often hear us talk about is equity. And how do we provide all children, irrespective of those demographics, all children with the kind of quality of education that they need? The gifted program, that was one of the things, if you remember the transition team that was here when I first got here, called out. We have a population that's untapped. We have students here who have gifted abilities, and we need to be addressing that more, right? We've opened a STEAM school. We're responding to some of the research that we're using about what's going on in our district. There's so much more. The STEAM school is just a seed, one of those seeds that we got to plant in our community, because what we want is these things to be here 20, 50 years from now. And we want to make sure we provide all of our students with that kind of education. It shouldn't matter what your zip code is that determines whether or not you get a great education. Public schools are meant for that. And, we have a lot of political, rhetoric out there that has a different belief system, right? And public schools are in danger. And we have to make them better, period, because for kids like me, it was the only option I had. So the other piece that we'll be talking about in a little bit, and as we go throughout this entire process, is also our alternative school. Right now it's at Mark Twain. I don't know what all this will unfold as we begin to talk about the buildings that I'll talk a little bit about in just a few moments. But we have to look at our alternative program as well and design that so that it addresses the needs of students who have challenging situations. When I was a high school principal, I can tell you I had many students of mine who were parents and students at the same time, males and females. And we had programs specifically for students who were parents because they couldn't come in the traditional setting. They had to do something different. And we had to figure out how to respond to their needs. And that's what we want to do here. I'll call this next phase of these few words I'm going to talk about the bookends. The bookends, right? The bookends being early education and high school redesign. The video you just saw a minute ago was largely about high schools, right? It is so important to make sure that our early ed program, Ross said it earlier, that this is the epicenter of parents as teachers. We have a strong early education program. All of our early ed teachers that are here with us this evening, just wave your hand. Anybody who's there you go, look at that. See, who are fully committed to this work. Give them a round of applause. I said to Joy, I said to Mildred Winter, you got to come correct when you're talking with Mildred Winter. She'll tell you I'm 90 plus years old, so I've done my thing. They have fully endorsed some of the work that we're talking about doing with early ed and strengthening our early ed program. We absolutely have to make sure we do that. Let me tell you a quick example. I hear this from teachers often. One of the things I hear is that we have students who are coming to our schools that are having meltdowns all the time. In early ed, in kindergarten, even in elementary school, right? 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, having meltdowns. You ever thought about why that's happening? Well, one of the things that we're learning is that many students haven't had the opportunity to go to schools that have, or rather have had the early ed experience. Specifically, developing their personalities early, finding their voice. We've taken a look at a program that Maplewood Richmond Heights already has, programs that are around this country, the Reggio Emilia concept. I'll be taking guidance from people, our teachers and people who are experts in early child development. We have to have our early child development programs being the bedrock of preparing our students for high school. We have to make sure that kids come to us ready for that. Okay, and in a few minutes, I'll say a little bit about that great organization and why we feel like that makes sense. Again, what we're talking about is the research and the recommendation that we bring to the board. The board makes the decision about what direction we go in, and we'll have community input throughout this process, and you'll see that in just a moment. Next slide. So one of the things we did say on the 25th of October was that we really need to think about what early ed looks like and also elementary schools look like, all the way to middle school. Okay? We moved Berkeley Middle School to a 6-8 model. I was a middle school teacher and a middle school principal, and I can tell you that we need more time with our students in middle schools. I believe in the middle school concept for those of you who teach at the middle school level. I taught at the middle school level. So we believe strongly in not only strengthening our Parents as Teachers program, but also having schools that are pre-K2 schools. And this is an idea that we have, and I've actually heard from some folks who teach early ed about this. And so think about something real quick. Pre-K2. A school that's pre-K2, right? Well, one thing you may not know as you look at this is that when does state testing begin? At what grade level? 3rd grade. So that means we have schools now, if we do this model and the board, the community supports this, if we do a pre-K2 model, then what happens is you have a school with a principal in that school who can focus specifically on child development. Now, the pressures of testing doesn't go away from the state, it does, but we still have accountability in the district, right? But for the state, principals can focus on how do I make sure that when a student leaves us in 2nd grade, that they're ready for 3rd grade, right? And they're ready for the kind of reading and learning that will make them successful throughout the rest of their high school and secondary school career and on to college. I know some people say, well, every child won't go to college, but I don't know who that's going to be, right? I don't know who will or will not go to college. And so what we're going to do is prepare them. We say college and career ready. We're going to give them the skills they need. So if they change their mind on graduation day, they may have been preparing to go to the Marines, and they say, I want to go to Mizzou, they ought to have the classes they need. They shouldn't have to go back and do any remediation. They should have Division I status ready when they leave us in high school. And they make that choice, not us, right? So pre-K2 we feel strong about, 3-5, because that is focusing specifically on getting kids ready for the middle school and high school levels, okay? And so we're talking specifically about 6-8. But here's the clincher for me. And I was a high school teacher, high school math teacher. I was a high school principal. We have got to do high schools different. So when you talk about redesign and redistricting, and I'll talk about that's next, I just wanted to lay some groundwork. We can't keep doing business the same way we've been doing it and expect outcomes, better outcomes for our students. I'm proud to say that International Baccalaureate, the organization out of Switzerland, if those of you who may not have heard of IB, I had full IB diploma when I was a high school principal. We've been approved at McClure North to begin the IB process. We've basically gotten in the door. And let me tell you that students who go through IB programs almost always get their first choice of whatever college they want to go to. Some of the kids who were in my high school that were IB students were doing some of the things I didn't do until I got to college and graduate school. And that's the kind of education that we have to make sure we're providing for every student. So here are some of the programs that we have been working on in our high schools, right? IB, International Baccalaureate, Advanced Placement, North, McClure, and MSB. I was just looking at the MSB list today. Dr. Kitson and myself were looking at the MSB list today. We have so many more students who are taking advanced placement classes who traditionally, like me, wouldn't have taken them. I never took an AP class because I never had that conversation with the teacher or a counselor to lead me down that path. We have identified all kids, not just black kids and brown kids, white kids, Asian kids, Hispanic, all kids. We want all students taking the kind of rigorous courses so when they graduate from high school, they're ready. They're ready for life. And I can tell you, and I say this all the time, and I mean it with every bit of passion in me, that I stand here only because of great teachers. I was first generation. My grandma I always speak about her, and she's been gone for 20 years. And I tell you what, if it wasn't for her training at home and teachers preparing me in school, I wouldn't be here. So any child can, right? But we got to make sure we're preparing them. PLTW. So let me just lay a little bit, and I'll move on because I want to get to the last part, and then we'll stop and be able to get time for questions. So what we want to do at North is to have our IB program. We're working on a couple programs at McClure. McClure already has the Freshman Academy. They've been working with the University of Chicago, and they're doing some excellent work, have moved their freshmen to an entirely different building. We're going to be strengthening the AP program there, as well as the PLTW, Project Lead the Way, and that's robotics, engineering, computer science, so that students are experiencing the kind of classes that gets them ready for life, right? MSB, in particular, we're working with a couple of organizations so that we want what we call P-Tech, PTEC stands for Pathways to Technology for Early College High Schools. So we have partnerships with UMSL. We've already been in those conversations, St. Louis Community College. So when students leave us, I said this before, folks, and I'll say it again. We want students with college credit by the time they leave high school. And the work we're talking about with redistricting, the work we're talking about with facility uses will lend itself to just that. Saying is one thing. It takes work. Just like the STEAM school, it just doesn't happen. You passed that bomb before I got here. We hope we just did what you wanted us to do, and that's provide the kind of quality that students will need. My son's a student at the STEAM school. You know, he was identified for gifted, so he was able to go to the STEAM school. I'm so excited about that. As a parent, you know, what parent doesn't want a high-quality education for their children? I think every parent does, right? And also, certainly we've been having the conversation about block scheduling. I'm a proponent of block scheduling. We're looking at a couple of models, and then we've done a tour at North County Tech. Because there may be many students who want to go into law enforcement and different careers. We have some high-quality programs already in our county. Let's tap into those resources and use those resources as we think about this entire process. So I'm going to give you a chance to read these two pieces, and this is going to be important as we lead into the redistricting conversation. So I'll give you about a minute to read this. As we talk about redistricting next and talk about facility usage, it's about equity, providing every kid, every student with a quality education so they're ready for life. And fiscally, we have to be responsible and accountable to all of you, taxpayers, and how we use taxpayer dollars. So keep those two things in mind as we talk about these next few things, okay? So here's our map of our district. This is Ferguson-Florissant, all the school buildings, all the other buildings that are here with us. So Jim isn't here with us, I don't think, this evening, Jim Troxel, but Jim is our transportation director. Myself, him, Terry, Laura, Larry, so many, Dr. Jadali, so many folks over the last year have been looking at enrollment patterns in our school district, looking at where our facilities are right now, looking at where the lines are right now in terms of the spaces. We have some buildings that, like North, that are at capacity with 80+% of our students filling that building up based on what the capacity is. We have some facilities that are at 30 and 40% capacity. And so there's an imbalance of usage of our facilities. So that's one of the things that prompts this conversation, right? We're not being as fiscally efficient as we need to be, okay? And so we'll be looking at our maps when we have community conversations, and I'll talk about when those, we'll be announcing when those are, but we'll be looking specifically at maps like this. We have many more, and we want to just give you an overview tonight and look at where the lines are currently drawn. Whenever we have redistricting conversations, and I've gone through redistricting in a different district as a principal, and I can tell you that we start with our high schools and we work our way back. That was one of the reasons Dr. Graves, when she was talking about the schools that our board members are assigned to, we started our high school, and that's our feeder pattern. We separated it already by 3 areas. McClure, South Berkeley, this is area 1. McClure is area 2. And McClure North is area 3. And we have middle schools and elementary schools that feed into that. We'll be looking at those lines that are there now and how we need to redraw some of those lines to balance our buildings, right? So that we make sure we're more efficiently using our spaces. And that will include a lot, okay? A lot of conversations in the community. So here are our enrollment patterns. 10 years ago, 2005, we were at about 12,500 students. Right now, we're about 2,000 students less than what that was, right? We still have the same facilities, though, the same spaces that we've been using. So if you decline in the numbers of students you have, but you still have the same space, well, there's some inefficiency somewhere. It's just like you look at your personal budget at home, and you use less energy costs, or rather, you need to be more efficient with your energy costs. We need to be more efficient in how we're using our spaces that are currently there, okay? So here's what we're going to be doing and thinking about redistricting. Redrawing the lines, redistricting, and where those are, and then what facilities we use in order to accommodate that change, and really in that order, okay? We really have to do a number of things before we can even have that conversation, okay? And so here are some of those things. throughout this entire process, tonight is the first conversation that we're having. That was sort of pushed further. We wanted to begin having this in January. I did have an opportunity to talk with Keith Eckberg, Ruth Brown. They came over and we met. I met with the Historical Society, having some really good conversations about concerns that they had. And I can tell you that we're having this conversation tonight a little bit sooner than what we had planned to have, but that's fine, because I want to make sure that people know where we are. So we'll be having many town hall, community forums, and we'll talk about when those are, and I'll tell you why in just a moment, why we can't give you the dates just yet. We also have questions that we are coming up with that specifically, and we're using some models of other districts that have used when they've done redistricting, when they've done facility usage analyses. But we also will have online surveys, and I'm not sure if we have some people in here right now who are part of the advisory councils that I run. Anybody, any of our parent advisory council members are here right now? Anybody who's been on the superintendent's advisory council, just stand up for me real quick. I just want to, let's give them an applause. I really appreciate them. Yes. Because, you know, they meet with me a couple times a year in my office or at the boardroom, in the boardroom rather, and we've been having some really good conversations. And I actually showed that video I showed you, I showed it to them at our last meeting last month. The next part, though, is really important, folks, and that's that facilities assessment. And the facilities assessment is an assessment that engineering firms have created, not something that we are just making out of the air. It is a tried and true, tested way to look at facilities. Those 4 areas, site conditions, building conditions, educational suitability, and technology readiness, those are categories that engineers, and we'd have to bring in somebody and do an analysis of all our school buildings, right? And they give each building a grade, 0 to 100, 100 being the best, right? They will give us a grade based on each of those facilities. So that way, when we begin having conversations about schools and districts and lines, and we talk about schools in particular, we have some facts in front of us about what's the suitability of this school for the educational goals that we're after, right? When we talk about high school redesign, talk about early ed, et cetera. So those 4 areas are really important. Next slide. We haven't developed a master plan because we can't without you. We have to have community involvement, right? And we take whatever we learn, looking at feedback, many of the other kinds of things we'll talk about in our forums to the board, and we go back and forth. So as we develop a master plan, I mean, I could write a plan, but that wouldn't do any good because the community hasn't been involved. And the community will absolutely be involved. And like I said, we were talking about block scheduling a minute ago, I said to folks, listen, if whatever block scheduling recommendation we make, it'll be something that the staffs vote on. Won't be something I say we would do. There has to be involvement with every group. So looking at our educational goals, getting community voice, and getting data, and all that coming together, we can begin creating our plan. We have some real good models that we can follow after, and we'll tailor it to Ferguson-Florissant. So we absolutely create the kind of plan, draw lines where they need to be drawn that's most efficient for our district, and look at facilities and how to best use our facilities, okay? Once we go through that process, then we'll take that master plan to the board. Let me just throw the timeline up real quick, and then I'll be done. So right now we're in December. We've made no plans. We're having our first conversation right now just to give you an update about where we are. The board hasn't decided to close any school. The vote, Robinwood, central conversation, thoughts, that was a scenario of other scenarios that we haven't even talked about in here yet. And that didn't get to that meeting that night because we were talking about a particular scenario. I said to the board, and I don't think this is an option, but you know, the community and you or the board could decide to do nothing at all. But I think that they've certainly pushed me to say, we got to do some things based on the resources we have right now. Because let me tell you, whatever we decide, whatever the board decides about what we do and they charge administration to do, whenever there's savings, you know where those savings are going to go? To the classroom, to teachers, to students, to content. It has to. We have to make sure, you know, I said this publicly, I absolutely own our APR drop to 67. That should not have happened. And I just, you know, it tears me up on the inside when I look at it, especially when I look at some of the data that we had in front of us, graduation rate, for example, and some of the data wasn't accurate. So we have to make sure we have procedures in place and processes in place so that those things don't happen again. We know educationally instructionally what to do. We've been doing this work for a couple of years now with our ILTs and looking at teacher practice and what's going on in the classrooms. Those other things, graduation rate, attendance, those are compliance things. And we can do that. That's not hard at all. But we got to have structures in place that ensures that it continues to happen. And not just if I'm gone or principals are gone, whoever comes behind, those things are in place. January to March, we'll look at our facilities assessment. We'll also be having a demographer here to look at population trends. We'll go back maybe as far as 1990, but the census years, 2000, 2010, and all the way up. There are also interim assessments from the census that we can get to see where our population trends are right now. We'll look at where our kids are and be very thoughtful about where those lines are drawn. We'll have several scenarios that you'll have input on. I know I've heard the board say to me about, some on the board talk about community schools and some of the work that was done with the redistricting before. So all those things will be given fair opportunity to be discussed so that when the decision is made about scenarios, that those things have been considered. We move down to March. It's in March, once we have our facilities assessment, have had some other data in front of us, we'll begin having community forums, and we'll announce those dates in March. We need time to be able to do those facilities assessments. That will take some time. And that's something that the board will have to give us charge of doing first. And then if they do, then we'll move forward with that. Once we have the data in place and get all that information, then at that point around March or so, we'll announce the dates of community forums. And that's where we'll be. I mean, I've sat in some of your homes with coffee, at the coffee house, wherever I'll meet you, because I want to make sure that we're listening. The board is absolutely available to help and to do this process, to lead this process. I'm there to support them, to make sure that we're responding to your questions and your concerns. Once we have an opportunity for community engagement, then we'll come away with a plan that the community supports and that we can take to the board for approval. And from there, we'll talk about what those projects look like. There are a lot of things that could happen in that process. I mean, I've gotten some questions already that I won't even begin talking about because you may have some specific questions that I haven't thought about yet. But there are lots of scenarios that we could consider in this whole process. But we absolutely want to make sure our community has input all the way through, and once we do that, we'll begin our implementation process of the projects that the plan lays out. Okay. So again, no decision to close any school. The board hadn't made any of those decisions. We had a study session. We began talking about scenarios. We've immediately heard from many of you, and rightfully so. And I'm glad because that says that you are committed to our community. And as Rob said earlier, schools are more than just buildings. People have connections. And I know Ruth was saying when I was meeting with her and Keith in my office, her family history is at Central. And so people are really connected. And schools, strong schools, make strong communities. I believe that to my core. And that is my presentation. We're going to take a break for about 15 minutes and give you an opportunity. We do have, so staff is around. We have some comment cards, questions that you might have. Those who want to speak, we want to give the opportunity. My son was here earlier. My wife picked him up, so he's going home. He's getting his homework, so I can stay as long as you need me. That's why I'm saying that. I can stay as long as you need me to. The board will be here. We're going to be here to support any questions you might have. Okay? So we'll take a 15-minute break and come back in 15 minutes. Thank you so much.
Approximately 55% of the students at Central School are walkers. And then when they go to new school, they can't walk to their school, and then you have to pay the bus drivers to stop at the stop. And that'd be money. So those are all the cons for what? One pro, saving money? Yeah. But
politician in the making, boy. So Claire, I'm going to go ahead and give you my vote. I vote yes. No. She's already sold me. So thank you for that. And again, no decision has been made to close any school yet. Certainly, we've had some conversations about Central. Lots of conversations in terms of study sessions with the board. Thank you. And I'll pass this on to Mr. President. Where is he? But I think you are, you know, make some good points. The one thing I did want to respond to you on was the, let's just hypothetically speak then, right? Like, here's a scenario, you know, Central was closed, for example. Then you talk about abandoning a building. So, again, nothing has been decided, but there has been, I've heard comments from folks who I've met within the community about repurposing the space itself. So, I absolutely hear what you're saying. And when we have community meetings, I certainly hope you'll be a part of that to continue voicing your opinion. But also those students who, have also signed on the petition saying, I support Claire and, what you guys are about. So thank you for that. That was brave too, wasn't it? Give her another round of applause. Yeah. Cecilia Liddell. Cecilia? She here? Back here? Okay. Yep. If I pronounce your name incorrectly, please correct me. I absolutely want to make sure I say your name well.
The question that I have is when you do redistrict the schools and decide which schools you're going to close and get everything in order, that's going to take a lot of time, don't you think so?
Yes,
More
ma'am.
than just a year?
No, yes, ma'am. So when we were talking specifically about a 10-year plan or a master plan, so it's going to take some time, whatever that plan is, to do any of that, right? And so it's really going to depend on, the assessment and looking at facilities and how we repurpose those facilities for whatever the usage may be. But yeah, you're talking about a multi-year. At the end of the presentation, in fact, I use the word multi-year. It will take time to do anything. The only thing that won't take time is to do nothing, right? But any of the other things will take, several years. So, let's just say if there was a plan in place already and we've done the community engagement, then you're still talking about year 1 through 3, year 3 through 5, year 5 through 7, year 7 through 10. I mean, so it's ongoing depending on what the plan is. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, and also would all those records be public so we would be able to view them at will?
Yes, so anything that the board has conversation about becomes a public document, and so you certainly can request that. But, my hope is that folks that are here and more folks will be here to be a part of that conversation, period, because it will absolutely be a public one. There are some things that are protected by what the conversation is in terms of when the board talks about certain things, but that's absolutely something that we will be having a conversation about in public. Speaking of that, so I do want to take a chance. I didn't recognize just folks who live in the community folks who live in Ferguson-Florissant, the attendance zone, whatever the case is, like myself. So could I just get a wave of hands of the folks who live in Ferguson-Florissant School District? Absolutely, yes. Look at that, that's awesome. Folks are committed to the work, so I hope I answered your question.
Okay.
And we have others here, so Mr. President, if you wanted to say anything about her comment?
Yeah, transparency is going to be on the forefront as we go through this whole process. We're not going to be keeping secrets from people. That ultimately there will be a decision made. And I like to think, in the world that Rob lives in, that everybody will be very happy with it. But reality, it's not going to be that way. But when the decision does come, I mean, everybody will know about it. And it's not going to be a situation where we're going to make a decision and it's like, okay, next month is when it's going to happen. So.
Absolutely. Next is Denise. Is it Geringer or Geringer? Geringer.
Hi. I am a 58-year resident of Ferguson-Florissant School District. I was part of the first redistricting in 69 and 70. I went from Robinwood to Duchesne. And then in 70, 71, I went to McClure North. I was the 4th graduating class. McClure North has changed drastically from the innovative school that was built in 1971 to 74. I don't know what the capacity is, but my graduating class was over 1,000.
Yeah.
And my sister's graduating class was over 1,300. So I can't imagine that McClure North is at capacity because we had 3 classes that had well over 1,000 kids in them each. So I don't know how much the school, I do know how much the school has changed because I toured it. The other things is I am part of Parents as Teachers, And Parents as Teachers is the beginning, but right now, once a child gets into pre-K, we no longer have the opportunity to connect with those families. That is because we are not available to those teachers. We don't see those teachers anymore. We used to be able to come into the office and say, hey, Lindsay, how's so-and-so doing in your class? We have no connection to our families anymore. Some of those families, I have a family that somebody has here that I've had for 13 years. That's through a lot of kids. And I'm losing that connection because I can't see the teacher. And I used to be able to go to those classes and say, oh, wow, there's the mom. I get to connect with her. We don't get to do that.
Why can't you see the teachers now?
Because we are at airport school.
Okay. That's what
And we are nowhere near
Yeah.
any of the schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we don't have any connection to anybody except Debbie and Kelsey. That's it. The other thing is 4 years ago, our buses were taken away from us for preschool. We lost almost half of our kids that attended preschool. If you want kids to come back into our preschool, you're going to have to do the transportation, because we lost half of our kids that went to our 3- and 4-year-old classes because of lack of transportation.
Yeah. So you make some really good points, and I want to make sure that I try to treat the three I think I heard. One was about North and the size. So I'm not sure what maybe, I don't know if you had like shifts where some came in the morning or the afternoon, but physically North is built for about 1,800 students, all right? And there's been some subdivides in the building itself. So some of the rooms that were traditional classrooms, now you have to go through a classroom to get to another classroom. So there's been a lot of changes. What I can tell you is that North, and we haven't walked North yet, I haven't yet. We've walked a couple of buildings, and we're specifically looking at not only the floor plan that was done by the architects class, but we are looking specifically at what space is a classroom space, right? Because that's really important. Like, what's on the floor plan may not be what's actually in the school right now. And so that's why we're physically walking the building to see where a classroom is, one, right? And then two is we're looking at class size based on what DESI's guidance is, right? And so for our kindergarten through second grade students, it's 25. For 3 through 4 is 27, and the number just goes up. We just use 25 across the board. Even at high school where you can have 30 students, we still just use 25 when we're looking at capacity issues, right? So North is probably one, Parker Road being another one that is around 80% capacity, and so it's pretty tight. And folks who work at North can tell you, it's pretty tight. And so, we have to look at those lines because, McClure and MSB are not. There's space available. If you look at the district as a whole, there are a lot of seats available. They're spread out, and so we have to really be thoughtful about how we think about what those lines look like, because that will in turn decide what schools students go to. The second thing I think I heard you talking about was wasn't the transportation. That was the last piece. So being able to get there, right? So airport and airport school and being here and there. So, one of the, and that's a part of some of the work we're already doing right now, right? So some of our team members have moved. Well, we started this team school. We will be moving everybody from the current administration building because of the cost to keep that building up. And so we've dispersed, and I actually met, I think, with early ed and talked a little bit about the plan in terms of where folks would go. And I said then, my hope is that this is, something that is a transition, but it's going to depend on this whole process and what the board decides in terms of the direction we go in. I can tell you that, and I said this, and I'll say it publicly, that I am a proponent of early education and having centers. A couple scenarios, but I'm just talking about my thoughts, right? There are a couple scenarios we can look at. Pre-K2 is one to be able to serve communities, because we talk about community schools. But I've seen early ed centers, too, that could lend itself to some really good, deep relationship building. And I think that's really important. The piece about early ed, though, and the transportation is there's a cost, right? Like costs are really important. And so ideas are great, but we got to look at where our resources are currently being used, right? And so we are one of few districts that put the amount of money in early ed that does in North County, if not St. Louis, period, right? Like we put, and I'll say this, we put millions of dollars, at least a couple $1 million in early ed right now with our budget. I know that for sure. And we don't get those dollars back. Now, the General Assembly is looking at some reimbursements for our early ed students, so that would certainly help some of that work. I agree. We don't want to put barriers in front of parents, especially parents who need the support. We just have to consider what those costs look like, right? And factor that in as we have this conversation around redistricting and facility usage. Okay? Does that answer your? All right. Shannon Hayslett. Yes. She said that. So it looks like early release, block scheduling.
I did. I was jotting some things
Oh,
down,
okay,
but I'm going to
okay.
tune in on one thing, and so, because I'm tired. So, well, good afternoon, everybody. I do want to focus on, like, the biggest thing I heard you say was early childhood, and I think what you're saying is wonderful. But what I need to address at this particular time, because I have 3 children, I have an early childhood child, I have an elementary child, I have a middle school child. And so I'm seeing that with this process, early childhood wasn't a possibility for us because of the timing. I work all day long, so I couldn't go to a half-a-day program. It wasn't feasible. It would probably give them a better experience to prepare for elementary school. But again, if I don't work, there's a problem because we have to survive.
All right.
2, elementary. I'm going to start by saying that I'm an influenced parent. I am there. I speak my mind. I give kudos to my child. Miss Dwyer is here, and my first grader he is a lot at times. He is very busy, but she has a lot of children in her room as well, and the expectation that's put on her to make sure that a teacher makes every profession possible. We wouldn't be having a job or being anywhere if somebody didn't teach us something. So when we're doing these things and we're seeing what we're doing, you can't have 25 to 30 kids in a room and reading is a basis.
Right.
And if they don't have that foundation of being able to read and understand what they're reading, by saying, okay, we have an aide that comes in for 30 minutes, but she's trying to work with every student in the building, and you have this one other teacher, and they're shared between 3 classes, it's unfair. So when we look at allocating funds, we need to give them where they're needing. If they can't read and they can't understand what they're reading, and some parents do have to work several jobs. I do try to work at home with my son as well, and he has been improving. But working with your own kid is a very hard thing. Because they're not as enthusiastic about working with mommy and daddy as they are when he says, I love Miss Dwyer.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out the instructional support for that reading base. Yeah. How can we bring it back? Because we want them to move. We want them to love. A good teacher makes you love learning and hate them all at the same time at times. So that's a wonderful thing. But to make them being more accountable, they need some support because you don't want them to burn out and lose your good teachers.
Yeah, totally. Amen, sister. So I will tell you that, yes, is, I guess, the simple answer to what you're saying. Whenever we look at our resources, and I said this earlier, every dollar we can move, we're going to move it to the classroom. We have instructional support leaders who are supporting teachers in schools now, and that's at the elementary level because we can only do it there, and trying to use those resources. One of the things I've often heard from teachers as I'm in school buildings, in particular elementary teachers, is reading specialists, for example, and having folks to be able to support students who are struggling. I was also an elementary school principal, and I was a principal in the days of reading recovery, and I had 4 reading recovery teachers at my school. 4. I had about 450 kids, and we were able to use some federal dollars, et cetera. I say that only to say that I believe in what you're saying when it comes to. I'm not telling you they're going to show up in January. What I'm saying is I believe in what you're saying, right? Because I know, and folks who teach elementary students and teaching students how to read as well, I totally hear you because because it's not like you have to do it for every child. It's where the need is the most. Because when students get that foundation, they can move, right? but you got to be able to lay that foundation. And so that's why we believe early ed, putting a lot of resources there, shoring that up, so by the time they get to kindergarten, they're ready to learn, right, and ready to move forward. But also putting more resources in the classroom period, because if we're going to get students ready for college and career, there's a lot of work to be done at the elementary level. Like, I believe in high school redesign, but I say that because that's the other bookend of early education. We talked about what's in the middle and shoring up what's in the middle. I mean, a lot of our efforts have, like I just said with ISLs, have been put in elementary schools, right, because we know how important it is. If I had to say an area that we have a lot of opportunity to work on, that's middle schools, right? Our middle schools, we have to, our middle school principals are working and teachers are working diligently, but we have got to really look at how do we get kids ready so when they get to middle school, they can really move and be prepared for high school. So there's a lot of work to be done. We have our 2 billion word reading challenge. Kids are reading more, but it didn't happen overnight, right? Like, if I had a pill that I could, or some dust I could sprinkle, I'd do it, you know? But reading, it takes hard work, right? I have a 12-year-old, and my wife, thank God, she was a reading teacher in her former life before being a counselor now. But we spend a lot of time, you know, he doesn't listen to me like, you know, he will when he goes to class. He hears teachers better sometimes. So I get it as a parent, how important that is. But what I can say is that every opportunity we get, every resource is going to go in that classroom, because it's about teachers. I say that, and I don't just say it because it sounds good. That's what helped me. Great teachers. You said it. Teachers touch every profession. I believe what Frederick Douglass said. It's easier to raise strong children than to repair broken men. Right? And we got to do that. We got to prepare children so they're strong. Because guess what? When kids are strong, our communities become stronger. When they're not strong, it erodes our communities. When kids aren't educated, then it's survival. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's all about survival. And if kids don't have the skills, now I know too many young men who look like me, who went to school with me, who are either dead or in jail, because they didn't have that early foundation, right? And that's a real issue, not just in my community in North Carolina, right here in our community in Missouri and all over this country. It's a real issue, and we got to deal with those issues. And that's why I say all means all. We got to address every child, right? We got gifted students. We got to push them. We got students who are struggling. We got to support them, and everybody in between. Yes. What's coming in January is a great conversation about what we're going to do to improve our district. But I love it. I always love to have that conversation about instruction. Leila Martin. Yes, right here.
My question was about how do you ensure, well, I'm a 12-year resident. I have raised kids from the elementary schools all the way through high school, 4 kids. And over the years, I've noticed that programs are diminishing for these kids. With the redistricting, how do you ensure that these programs are either going to come back or going to stay?
Any examples of a program that in particular?
They used to take music programs. They're not doing, well, this one, or music, things like that.
You want to say anything?
So just any, a lot of the
Yeah.
programs are just disappearing.
So, you know, STEAM, and the A in STEAM is the arts. I wish Doug were here. Doug's not here, is he? Doug Irwin. You know, because our fine arts specialists, our fine arts teachers, so I love jazz, for example. I love the arts. But I can tell you that Carrie Pace, who's a teacher at the STEAM school, she's one of my son's teachers. So they had a really good event a couple weeks ago where the students were redesigning some space in their, one of their classes is a graphic arts class. I think it's the title. I may have gotten that wrong. But to your point, though, we fully believe in the arts, fully believe in supporting our music programs, our visual arts, our performing arts. There's opportunities for us to talk about academies and what that can look like. So that isn't coming off the table. It's actually on the table more, especially with STEAM. And that's one of the reasons that we have to have community conversations, because what does that look like? And also engaging some of our other partners, for example, at UMSL, and they've done some really good work around performing arts. In fact, when I first got here, I remember going over to the Two Hills Center and taking a look at a couple of performances there. So yeah, we absolutely believe in the arts, and I want to see it expanded. The board wants to see it expanded in our schools and community, which is the purpose of STEAM and the A, but we want to scale it up. So absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I always say Juilliard, right? Like the performing school in New York City. Like, you know, we ought to be preparing kids for Juilliard, right? I mean, that's really the headset space that we need to be in when it comes to preparing kids. So, anybody want to? Next one is Ms. Noker. I got a chance to talk to Ms. Noker earlier. Is she still here? Yes, she is. It's right here, Gary.
I brought you all a letter this evening from the board, the Ferguson Landmarks Commission, and the subject was the closure of Voughton Central Schools. It has come to the attention of the Ferguson Landmark Commission that the Ferguson-Florissant Board of Education is considering closing 3 elementary schools. 2 of these schools, Central and Vogt Elementary, concern us. As stated in the Ferguson Historical Society board letter dated November 28th, both of these schools have social, civic, and historic significance to the students and the residents of the city of Ferguson. Vogt Elementary is one of 50 St. Louis public schools designed by St. Louis architect William Ittner. Ittner understood that very young children are like sponges, so he exposed them to beauty, light, and a healthy environment to give them a head start in life. Vogt is a beautiful, healthy, and well-maintained building that was just recently renovated and updated. However, beyond the historical significance of these buildings, both schools are an anchor for the Ferguson community. There has been a noted increase in young families in the area surrounding Vogt, with many children walking to school. Vogt is consistently a high-performing school and one of the top 2 elementary schools in the whole district. I'll skip some of this. We fully support early education for all the children, but the disadvantaged children currently at Voughton Central should not lose their neighborhood school because of that. The district needs to remember that they're duty-bound to help all students succeed. Teachers who provide a positive environment can make all the difference to these students and parents. Taking children from a stable school environment and moving them to a school that has a consistently changing student population or a school building that is consistently vandalized would be harmful to these students. Free early childhood education would be an excellent addition, however, not at the expense of our top-rated elementary schools. As taxpayers, we expect and demand educational and fiduciary responsibility. We also expect transparency, and we appreciate the chance to learn more at these meetings. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. So we had an opportunity to talk a little bit earlier, and I'm glad I've read that letter in particular. I got one you had given to me this evening also. But yes, so we will have that conversation. The board hasn't decided to do anything yet, and so we absolutely take that under strong advisement. And I know that you all will be a part of the conversation we'll have, many conversations we have in the community about, you know, what we do going forward, what recommendations go to the board, and what the outcome looks like. So. Duly noted. I even said earlier, my son, we lived right around the corner from Vogt when I first moved here. We rented a house on Hereford before buying the house we bought in Ferguson. And so my son went to Vogt as well. And so he's in 7th grade now, so he would have aged out of there. But I totally hear you. Likewise with some of the sentiments I've heard about Central as well, and the historical components that go along with that. So we absolutely will take that under strong advisement. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Dr. Muhammad.
All right, I have two hats today. I'm a parent of 2 students at Vogt, so obviously that concerns me. So the question I have is, in terms of what we decide to do in terms of redistricting or closing elementary schools, what about the tax implications? Mm-hmm. Will there be a bond issue? Mm-hmm. So that's my first question, because as a property owner in Ferguson, I live in Ferguson, I work here, I'm concerned about that. My second question, I'm putting on my teacher hat, all right? I teach at MSB, right, this school here. So what is the plan for developing like a professional studies program? Because a lot of districts around us, like Afton, they have the St. Louis Caps, program where students come to school half a day, and then they're in industry the second half of the day. Then you have Spark out in Parkway. Students come to school halfway, choose an entrepreneur pathway, and then they're in industry. Rittner's doing something. So is there a plan to develop a type of professional studies program? Because right now, our kids are not going to be able to compete because they don't have that experience. So is there a plan to develop a professional studies to get our kids who may not choose to go to college, but to get them career ready?
No, that's
so those are my two questions.
Timely, both of them are. So I don't know about a bond issue yet. I can tell you that any kind of changes and preparing for the future, that could be a potential. And so that's something that will be guided from the board and the conversations we have in community about what, the way forward looks like. I think what's really key is when you talk about facilities assessments and what I talked about up there, one of those components, in addition to site conditions and building conditions, is also educational suitability and then the technology parts. So the educational suitability is really, really important, right? Like, what kind of programs are important to us? I mean, we just heard one of our citizens say a minute ago about the arts, right? So does our school buildings lend itself to expanding those kinds of programs? And so when we have community meetings and are talking about the data, it's important to consider what is it that we're after as a community, and does our buildings, do they lend themselves to creating that kind of space, right? And so that's really, really important. The second part is, so I'm actually going to be in a meeting Wednesday and Thursday of this week, and focusing specifically on McClure South Berkeley, and focusing specifically on working with community and giving our students an opportunity to do some work in the community that's an extension of what they're learning in school. And I won't go into the details yet because I don't know what the path is going to look like with that. But what I try to do is spend my time focusing on how do I support school principals and teachers and students around the work itself, which is why we spent a lot of time with North getting the IB application done. I mean, that was a huge undertaking, right? And it took some time to get that done to submit it by October 1. We were able to get that submitted. We started on that last school year. That got approved, right? We have been working diligently with McClure. They started the Freshman Academy. In fact, they did that presentation last year, and we hope we can expand that to all the schools, as well as the AP PLTW cohort model that we're looking at for McClure. With MSB, I've mentioned PTech, but also within that model is some work that extends from what students are doing here in school and what they do in the community, and by the way of internships and community service. So I'm absolutely a step ahead of you on that one, thankfully. So I could have paid you to answer me that question any better, right? That's really good. Because, it's really about, so here's the question that I think we ought to be posing to students. Not what do you want to be when you grow up, right? But what problem do you want to solve in the world? And you have to take, so we can't, that's one of the reasons for the video. We just can't keep teaching math in silos with just math, or ELA or English or another subject. How does it come together, and how can I use that knowledge to solve problems in the world, right? Like, that's how you prepare students for careers in college, so that when they leave here, they're able to go out and be marketable. Because there are a lot of things that we don't talk about that are embedded in that process. Public speaking, for example, collaboration, for example, teamwork. I mean, those are really important skills for students to have when they leave high school, right? So they need to gain that through experiences. So that when they leave here, what I often hear employers talking about when we have conversations with different folks around the region is the lack of soft skills that some of our students have, the problem-solving skills that we need to be engendering in our students. So excellent question. I hope I was able to answer some of it. Jean Betcher? Jean?
Yes. I want to first say I appreciated your presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
It was very enlightening. And I'm Jeannie Betcher. I'm the Vice President of the Ferguson Historical Society Board and a resident of Ferguson for well over 70 years. My mother went from grades 1 through 12 at Central School, graduating in the class of 1931 from Ferguson High School, which was part of the Central School building. I went to Central School for 1st through 3rd grades. For 4th grade, I went to Lee Hamilton School, which had just opened. At that point, the school district was growing, and so sort of redistricting as you're looking at now. And then for 5th, 6th, and 7th grades, I went to vote school, and I taught later there I taught physical education there later on. And all of you on the board and Dr. Davis were sent a letter from our Ferguson Historical Society Secretary, Mary Amrine, and this letter expresses the concerns of the Society Board concerning these possible closings that have been talked about. And I won't bother to go over all those points in that letter other than to say that Central and Vote schools are important to the school district both historically and as focal points of the community. And I realize that part of this whole plan is financially concerned also. And the district seemed to have enough money to purchase the property on Dunn Road where the STEAM Center is. And I think that's a wonderful program. I think that's wonderful. I've also heard talk that maybe the administration offices will eventually be in this building. If that's the case, I would think you could sell the property where the current administration offices are located and perhaps raise some finances that way. So I'm just asking, before you make any decision regarding school closings, I hope you will weigh all aspects of the situation. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. 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 We absolutely take it under strong advisement. Yes, ma'am. And I hear you 100%. 100%. Okay, Erica Williams.
Good evening. My name is Erica Williams, and I'm a parent and alumni and the executive director of a Red Circle, which is a new nonprofit organization that works in this district starting next semester and in the Hazelwood School District right now. My question or concerns were about the wraparound services and the other things that are outside of the school buildings, but that students need access to. Parental involvement, help, hunger issues, homelessness, and those types of things. What are the plans to really make that a stronger focal point in the district?
You know what, it's interesting you say that. I don't know if Amy is here, but we had a meeting today with Representative Cora Faith Walker, and one of the things that she talked about in our discussions with her was she goes around to school districts, and so she's been wanting to get in and talk to various school districts. She's presenting some legislation that specifically talks about trauma-informed schools and giving students the kind of supports that they need to be successful in order to be able to do school well. Like, what other things are going on? That's really important to be able to take away those barriers to learning. But I know our student services, our nurses, our psychologists, our counselors spend a good deal of time dealing with those particular issues that you are addressing. My wife, in fact, she's in a different district, but she's a school counselor, an elementary school counselor. And so I absolutely get it, how important it is to have those structures in place, that support in place. We did have a grant that was funded through, I think, Steve Stinger's office, and those dollars expired. And so we had some therapists in our schools, especially after post-Ferguson with Michael Brown. So, those are key. And so, certainly we have that on our radar screen. And I absolutely remember your presentation at the board, so I appreciate that support that's going to be there for the community. Sure.
I know our pieces are in place, but there's, from my experience with working to get into the district, the coordination can be a little bit tighter.
Okay. So you talk to me and we'll figure it out. How about that?
Joe.
Awesome. I got a couple more.
Joe.
I'm sorry.
I just
I'm
wanna
sorry.
step
Yes,
in.
yes. Yeah, well, you know what? I'm sorry. Dr. Graves, that's her expertise. So.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. As a board member, that's one of my biggest concerns in regards to what's going on in the district, that we really have to work on that foundation piece first, because there's no way that learning could we can't accomplish any of that if that bottom foundation is not together. So that's one of my biggest things that I constantly really be pushing Dr. Davis on, is what are we going to do about the social and emotional health of our youth?
Yeah, that's a huge part. In fact, our Summer Institute focused on some of that work, social and emotional learning, so that's critical. So Mr. Inman, communication, I don't see the question, but I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, I just start off, I just wanted to let you know, being part of the superintendent parent advisory council and the early ed parent advisory council, my wife vice president of the PTO, having a 9, 6, 5, and 3-year-old in this district in elementary, early ed, and parent as teachers. I've seen your heart, and I know your heart for my children is as great as my heart is for my children. And I know the board members that I know, same thing, the heart for my children is there. So I have the utmost confidence in whatever move is made will be done in a way that's best for my children. And I want to thank you up front for that. You'll still see me, just like you did with STEAM. I'm still be at the meetings like I was with STEAM all the way through. But my concern and my request is, at the end of last year when we closed the admin building down from early ed, we had a son in pre-K and a daughter in probe. We left there hearing from the probe teachers that our daughter would be part of STEAM school. She would probably start at a different elementary school to start off the school year, but then eventually be over at STEAM. And we had no idea where the early ed son was going to go through the whole summer pretty much. Summer ended. We found out our son was going to one school, that our daughter was going to the school for the probe. But the concern that came in was me as a dad, and as active as I am in the district and with my children, being with them and going to the different events and things, the communication between me and the schools that my 2 children had been sent to was obsolete. I called about open house thing for probe. I was told by the office, we have no idea what time probe's doing it. We don't know what time the teachers are going to be there. There was no communication or anything there at the beginning of the school year. With early ed, I called trying to leave a message for my son at the school that his early ed teacher's at, and was told, well, I don't know how we're going to get that message. And then I took a bag to him one time because I had forgotten the bag at home. I took the bag up there, and they just looked at me like, what do you want us to do with that bag? So I ended up texting the teacher. The teacher sent the aide down to get it. We don't feel welcome, to be honest, at the schools that our children have been moved to, and we feel as though those schools have their things going, that maybe the early ed hasn't been welcome like they were when we were at the admin building.
I apologize to you, Mr. Inman, for your experience. I can tell you that, so what I will do, and I know you're on my advisory council, so we'll talk online because I want to make sure I personally address your concerns. But I absolutely want to know where they are so I can give you some support there. But I apologize to you because our aim isn't to turn parents away. Our job is to help you feel like you are part of our schools and community. So I'm personally sorry for what you've experienced. As a daddy, I can tell you, I love children, but I love my baby, and I want him taken care of, like every parent does. So just give me a chance to work with you, and we'll try to work through some of those issues.
Yeah, and like I said, my request is like if we do end up closing schools, whatever ends up being the decisions made to make this district better and to move forward,
absolutely.
That those parents are.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. Yes, sir. So we got a couple more, and then I'll be done. If anybody has to leave, certainly I'm not holding you hostage. You can absolutely leave. I think I have 3 more. Well, I have my glasses on. I'm sorry. Is that what? Okay. Stone? Kevin Stone? Kevin, okay. I'm sorry, Kevin. I'm apologizing. I had thought about that after I said it. I was embarrassing somebody's handwriting.
So one of my questions were, as far as it seems like tonight is selling us on redistricting. So at least that's what my perception is. Are the other options going to be seriously considered? And the other one was, you had said earlier in your presentation that the 3 schools that were mentioned were just examples. Why were those chosen as examples? And that was pretty much it. So.
Yeah. So the first part, you said something about redistricting, and I'm not sure if I...
Redistricting seems to be like it's being sold to us.
Right.
It's like that's the plan. It seems like it's already been chosen.
So we absolutely will have to look at our lines in order to be able to make our buildings usage more efficient. So two of the things I said was redistricting and facility usage, right? And I don't think you can have one without the other. One of the reasons that we have to look at facility usage is because of the decline in enrollment in our schools, right? And in order to balance that, you're going to have to look at where kids are going to school. So absolutely, redistricting is on the table in terms of what that looks like, where the lines will be, and all that is a part of the community discussions, right? So that's where we have to make sure community is a part of that discussion. But I think you're spot on, absolutely, that we have to consider redistricting in order to be able to better use our spaces, our facilities, and our district. So, why those schools were chosen, even in that example. I mean, we had a couple of examples, but we need more information. But specifically looking at, capacity, how many students can fit in this school, as opposed to how many students are actually there. So when you look at capacity, a school can have 500 kids and may have 200 kids, right? So you're at less than 50% capacity. So we're looking at all those numbers, but that's inadequate, right? Like it's inadequate to just look at that. You have to do a full-scale assessment to look at educational suitability and some of the other pieces I talked about earlier. So absolutely, redistricting is a conversation that we'll be having with communities that the board will directly lead on in terms of what and how we move forward. And then when we do public engagement, you have to do that piece so that you can begin looking at where those spaces are right now. We'll have a lot of maps that we've already been looking at to see where our kids are in our entire district. We're about 28 square miles, right? From the lower part of our district, southern, all the way to the northern part of our district. And so, but the kids are spread evenly across for the most part. And we look at it from high school students and where are they, just looking at that map with those dots, and likewise with all other grade scales. So yeah, we'll absolutely be having a conversation quite a bit over the next few minutes.
And I do want to add to that. On that October 25th meeting was the first time that the administration had an opportunity to give a formal presentation to the board. We've had side conversations, we've made our desires known that we really had to take a deep look at our school district and that the way we educate. So administration spent a lot of time coming up with ideas, and that was the first formal presentation. And with anything, the first conversation is not always what it's going to be at the end of the day. We knew that, and what we told them to do is go back and actually go deeper. Really take a deeper look at our school district and what opportunities lie within. If we're going to do this, we're going to go big. It can't just be all about pain. It has to be equal to reward, and that's the goal of our board, and as well as administration. So.
The final one that I'll address tonight is, can you explain the drop in the APR? Absolutely. We talked about this quite a bit today, actually, and also we're focusing specifically on where our data is. Dr. Zadala is going to do a more presentation at the board meeting real soon. Our next board meeting, I think, is next week, I believe. And so we'll be constantly having these conversations. Can't pronounce the last name. Nasira. Okay, thank you, Nasira. So our APR went from 70.4 to 67.4, I think it was. A lot of that came from, our graduation rate data and our attendance data. We lost 10 points there in particular, right? I was out for a couple of months to deal with my ordeal. When I got back and took a look at it, I wish I could get those 2 months back. I apologize again for all of that. But when I took a look at the APR data, specifically our graduation rate data, our schools had some inaccurate data when they were looking at the graduation rate altogether, right? And we have to look at making sure we have structures in place so that we don't lose those points. I mean, if you remember, there was an article, I think the St. Louis Post-Dispatch did on Review Gardens, going back and cleaning up some of the data. That data piece is really important, attendance data. So we lost 6 points in our graduation rate data that we should have gotten. I mean, in fact, we've gone back and cleaned some of the data up since I looked at that. If I could have done this 2 months ago, our APR would have gone up, right? That 6 points alone would have taken us to 71.4. We had gotten an additional 4 points for attendance, That would have carried us to 74. I totally get it. I said this to our administrative team. The community, that's a gauge for our community to say, we're moving in the right direction, and we're doing the work that kids deserve for us to be doing. And I can tell you that it just, I lost many nights of sleep because of that, because my child's in there. And what we want is supposed to have confidence in the work we're doing, right? What I can tell you is that instruction is improving in the classrooms. And so the test has changed a bit. There's been a couple of different pieces going on with that. Even this year, there's going to be a change in the biology test. And so there will be another change there. I guess my point is that, we are putting structures in place so we don't find ourselves here ever again, okay? So thank you for that question. I said this at the board meeting we had last week, and I say it again, I take full responsibility for where we are because we ought to be heading north, and we will be, I can tell you that. But when it comes to instruction, we have been spot on thinking specifically about what's going on in the classroom and how do we support teachers so kids learn more. And in a couple of words, make sure we're teaching standards at a rigorous level so kids are growing and learning. And teachers absolutely get that and believe that. And so our work is to make sure that we put in place those structures so those problems don't ever persist again. In fact, we've already had 2018 graduation meetings. We're still cleaning up the 2017 data, but we're looking at 2018 already, and I already had conversations with high school principals, had conversations about graduation and how we matriculate through. It's kind of simple. I'll just give you a quick example. DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, looks specifically at cohorts. If a child who is going to graduate in 2018, 4 years ago, they came in as a freshman, okay? And so the 4-year graduation rate is, who is that group of students that came in, let's just say it's 100 students, they came in 4 years ago, it's 2018, so 2014 was when they were freshmen. And in 4 years, they graduated in that 4-year period of time, hence your 4-year graduation rate. Our job is to make sure that counselors are assigned to a group of students and assistant principals so that they matriculate through high school. We know where every one of those students are every year. So if somebody gets lost in the shuffle, kids move, things happen, transiency happens. We got to make sure our data is accurate so that the child leaves us and goes somewhere else, but we don't have that documentation, and so we still have them in our denominator, if you will, on our graduation rate, but they actually are somewhere else in another school. When we found kids that are in San Antonio, they have enrolled in another place. I mean, those are issues that we got to make sure are clean. And so something as simple as that would have given us 6 points. I just threw my cards up in the air. I was just that frustrated, you know what I'm saying? But because I own it, and we have to make sure that we have those structures in place. So I hope that makes sense. But I can tell you that, and I said this before and I'll say it again, it's being keen about what needs to happen so folks have confidence in the work we're doing. This is hard work, and it takes a lot, but we have to be personally committed. It may not be your child, every child, I have one, but all of them are mine, ours. And we have to take personal responsibility for every child. And so, yeah, you can tell I'm a little passionate about it. Because, we're going to keep working hard. And I hope the community will continue to trust what we're doing. We're going to work hard to keep that trust, or to build and strengthen that trust as well. So, Mr. Chabot?
All right, I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Like I said, this will be the first of many conversations that we're going to be having over the next several months. For housekeeping purposes, there was sign-in sheets when you came in. It's important that you please include that information in there so we can stay in contact with you. If you haven't already done it, please like the Ferguson-Florissant School District's Facebook page. We do post media information out there as well. And also, by all means, share the information and spread the word. Your involvement in this whole process is vital in order to move the district where we think where it really needs to go. So, on behalf of the board and administration, thank you very much.
Good night.